There is a well-known saying that goes, always give the hardest job to the laziest person because they will find the easiest way to do it. What is the best real-life example to this you have seen? I once was a temp at a tiny office on a construction site in around 2003. I was only there for one day while the regular person was on some training. They sat me down and told me that I just needed to copy all these numbers from one program to another. So I selected them. Hit Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V. They stared at me. Turns out about 60% of this woman's time had been spent manually typing numbers from one place to another. At my last job, a truck suspension shop, we did inventory every December and it was someone's job to count all the washers and screws of every size. It was my first inventory and I casually mentioned that they should just weigh one screw or washer. Then weigh them all and divide the weight to get the count. Everyone looked at me like I had given them the key to the universe. Counting washers and screws went from a day or two to just a few hours. Myself worked for a semiconductor company and we had 9 interns running simulations to optimize a substrate for a new semiconductor called 3D Crosspoint, aka 3D NAND memory. Anyways, I got tired of manually reading outputs on a DOS screen. So I wrote a small Python script to scrub the outputs, take note of interesting data ranges, and then use Google's Vector API to generate a 3D heat map. You could click on the heat map and it would show you the conditions under which that data was generated. However, the output was in a format only I could read. I went from running 50 simulations per day to running 500,000. My boss was flabbergasted and gave me the computers the other interns were using to run more simulations. They got moved to a paper-pushing department. When my internship ended, they had no way of reading the output of the script without me. So they had to buy the script from me separately for more than triple my total pay for the period. Worked like a charm. Comment theme: don't do your job too well. Otherwise you or someone else will get fired. I worked for a company that used to calculate commissions to its sales staff via hand. I developed a script that took the results of the leaderboard and would spit out commission amounts. When I showed the owner of the company, he was so happy. My script would take the results of leaderboards, turn it into a commission statement with a summary, automatically email that out to sales management who would review/add any bonuses that weren't listed in the commission agreement, and then the manager would input that number. And it would go to payroll who would cut the checks. After 6 months of implementing it, payroll staff got reduced by 60%. I used to deliver beer. I did not like delivering beer. I may have ended up with 30 stops in a day, including deliveries that the customer would call into our office for. I used to bring extra beer and blank invoices with me on the truck, to prevent having to drive back to my warehouse to deliver one keg to a place that I was currently across the street from. 7 years later, the driver of that route is still doing that. When I worked at an inpatient unit, one of the tasks we'd get would be to do a check-in with every patient. There were about 100 when we were full. Nobody wanted that task. It would usually get split up except this one guy who was pretty lazy always wanted it, and I didn't understand it because he was lazy. Finally one day I was walking out for a break and I figured out what he did. He plopped himself right beside the food line door and wouldn't let people go in until they did their check-in with him. That's not how it was supposed to be done. It was supposed to be a chance for clients to connect with staff. But he'd get it done in an hour or so for the whole unit and be done for the day. Edited to add, yes, it was in a mental health facility. Kind of figured my username would give that away. This wasn't to assess for suicidally. That was a separate task in which people were given as much privacy as possible during morning meds. You sign something when you enter a group treatment center that says you understand that it's group treatment and confidentiality is limited. Worked construction right out of high school to save money for school. Once every other week, we'd get a shipment of hundreds of door parts. And they made me match serial numbers to parts and orders and confirm we got everything. Then organize it all. It literally took 16 hours at least. And time moved so slowly. So I got fed up with it and made a Python app that would take a list of pictures, extract text from the pictures, compare it to an order receipt, then spit out a list of all missing parts and extra parts. So it knocked it down to an hour process of just throwing the door parts in the correct pile while waiting for the script to run. The worst part is that I didn't even get a raise for doing it. The guy who wanted a drink but didn't want to get up/go downstairs. He logged into his router. Blocked access to his mom's laptop. Knowing she would come to his room and ask what was going on. While he fixed it, simply reset the Mac filtering. He asked if she could get him a drink. He removed the filter while she got the drink and it was fixed by the time she came back. I thought it was incredibly clever. Got hired for a 3-week temp job that was transporting strings of text from a text document that the company's app produced into separate Excel sheets relating to what the string in the text document was. It was hundreds of thousands of lines of records of which Office was printing, calling, emailing. Basically any time the network was used. They were making graphs about how much of call time was to what department/customer/etc. and things like that. Yeah. Just wrote a script that read the first couple words. Determined which Excel sheet for which string. Then watched TV for the rest of the 2 weeks. It ran 24/7 while I finished a bunch of Netflix shows. It worked perfectly. And the company paid me extra to keep using the script I had written. To make things better, someone shut the computer down and couldn't figure out how to restart the script properly, so I came in and restarted it for an extra $50. Best 3 weeks of my life. When I was a student, I worked at some glass water bottle factory. It was a factory that collected their glass bottles, washed them and refilled them. I was there to put the trays with bottles in the right spot and take out any bottles that shouldn't be there, like cola or beer bottles. First I found a way to automatically make the trays to be in the right spot, and later on I even saw how taking out other bottles didn't even matter cause another machine would do that. I just watched trays rolling by and the machine would do the job. Other people who worked there didn't like that cause I didn't do the job like they do it. Who has the story about the admiral moving an entire ship to get the sun out of his eyes during breakfast? I don't know that I have a specific example. But a buddy of mine and I used to spend our time working out the most efficient way to do our jobs. We used to tell ourselves, I'm not being lazy. I'm just being efficient. It became an almost daily thing. Why are we doing it this way? This is stupid. There must be an easier way. Then we'd find that and implement it. 9 months ago. I'd made my job so easy it was eliminated. Be careful what you wish for. In my first proper job, I got unexpectedly promoted to a mixed developer/sysadmin role, where a large part of my job was setting up accounts for students, giving them access to some form of public web space, emails and mailing lists, etc. The guy before me had done everything by hand, so the tasks took hours to do. Being lazy, I scripted/automated the lot, got it down to a handful of minutes work. Then spent the rest of the day reading in the peace and quiet of the server room. It was the early 2000s, so the internet was still a bit voodoo to most people. To add a bit of authenticity, I also captured the output of an Apache compile, and used to redump it out on the screen to make it look like my console was super busy. Wanted a break? Just turn on the dump. Hang a sign saying busy compiling. Don't touch, and then wander off around the busy university campus and pretend I was a student. Good times. In one of my early IT jobs, I spent about 2 months automating everything I did. Thereafter, I spent my days in air-conditioned isolation reading, hacking out entirely unrelated programs, engaging in protracted debates on Usenet, and responding to the very rare client problem. Things seemed to be running smoothly, so I took a couple weeks of vacation. When I returned from holiday, I was told that everything had run so smoothly in my absence that my services would no longer be needed. I had lazied myself redundant. A long time ago, I was sent to help a team that was designing some analog test equipment. Big problem was when 2 of the parts were at different temperatures, the calibration would go off. They wanted me to design a circuit to measure the temperatures of the 2 parts and apply a correction. I solved the problem by putting both parts on the same heatsink so they would be at the same temperature. It worked. I distinguish 4 types. There are clever, hard-working, stupid, and lazy officers. Usually 2 characteristics are combined. Some are clever and hard-working, their place is the general staff. The next ones are stupid and lazy, they make up 90% of every army and are suited to routine duties. Anyone who is both clever and lazy is qualified for the highest leadership duties, because he possesses the mental clarity and strength of nerve necessary for difficult decisions. One must beware of anyone who is both stupid and hard-working. he must not be entrusted with any responsibility because he will always only cause damage. https://en.wiki.org/wiki/kurt_von_hammerstein-equ. A few years ago my mom was tasked with fixing my grandparents' toilet while we were visiting for the holidays. The toilet reservoir was constantly filling and running, and thus flooding the bathroom. Because the buoy arm wasn't lifting high enough from the water in the reservoir to switch off the water flow. My mom, who is normally a very practical person, had been tackling the issue for hours. She was pretty distraught, thinking we would have to order a new buoy arm, maybe even a new sensor, or switch and pull the whole assembly apart to replace everything. She was planning out a trip to Lowe's and pricing things out when I walked in. I took one look at it and bent the metal arm the buoy was attached to down, so the arm had a slight upwards curve. The buoy still reached the same level in the reservoir, but registered on the sensor as higher because of the curve in the arm. Problem solved. Rangers lead the way. I watched it dawn on her what I had done, and she just looked at me like I had a third eye and said, "You little fucking shit. I've been getting my ass kicked by this thing for 4 hours and you fix in 4 fucking seconds." She was very happy I saved her from more work and spending more money. She calls me her little toilet engineer from time to time. I work on aircraft. It's mildly demeaning. Edit, and now my most upvoted comment is about a shitter I fixed once. Perfect. Thanks for watching.